Bum, bum, bum. All right, just taking a second to buffer, and we will get started here. All right, we are good to go. All right, welcome everybody. We are very proud to welcome in Peter Weir Clarke to our interview today. Peter is an animatronics and mechanical designer, mechanical effects designer and fabricator. He also teaches drawing and sculpture at the Art Institute of California. He has worked on blockbuster films, B movies. His work has been featured in art galleries, museums, international expositions, and he is most famous for being here today, but other than that, working with Baby Yoda on The Mandalorian. So, Peter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. So, we kind of want to get right into it. And usually, what we do with our interviews is we just want to hear about how you got started. Like, how did you first get interested in working on film, or like basically, it's because you're essentially a lifelong tinkerer, it sounds like. So, how did you get into doing that?
Um, well, okay, so I guess I went to graduate school at Rhode Island School of Design for sculpture in 2002, 2004. Um, or from 2002 to 2004. And as I was finishing up, um, everybody in my class was planning to kind of move to New York and become a starving artist and try to figure out how to make a career as a sculptor. And I had a teacher. That wasn't a thing that really interested me that much. And I had done what I thought was really good work in grad school, but it felt like it was sort of a complete body of work, and I didn't really feel the need to like. I didn't have any like burning artistic need to continue with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had an advisor there who said, you kind of know how to sculpt, you kind of know electronics, you kind of know mold making, and he was like, you should move to Los Angeles and do special effects, and it all seemed so easy the way that he put it, and I was like, wow, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, yeah, that's
So
perfect. They're just waiting for you out there. Just head on
yeah,
out there. They're
exactly.
looking for sculptors. Perfect.
And so I did that, not knowing anybody out here, and also not knowing that the skills that I had in grad school were not of the. They got me through grad school, but they weren't. They were definitely like tinkerer level skills and not pro level skills that you actually need when you're out here,
Yeah, yeah,
that are expected out here. Um, and so I found my first job on Craigslist, that was for a company that did kind of special effects, but it was building kind of high end props and things for people's like home haunted houses and for how like the Halloween industry.
yeah. Was it like Halloween time of year? Was this just
No,
no?
it's actually like a big enough industry um, to support. I mean, and there's a lot of people out here with money, and a lot of people all over the world with a lot of money that love Halloween, and there are also, there's a pretty big industry of, um, for a month every year they set up these big haunted houses or
Sure,
haunted hay rides and stuff, but they prep for those all year round.
sure,
So,
sure, sure.
um, uh, and so I got a job there at initially just as sort of like a scrub, but I did have some skills that kind of moved me out of scrub level pretty quick. Like I was a decent welder, and so I could kind of that that has always been a thing that got my foot in the door, is being a good welder, and
Yeah,
so that kind of moved me up pretty fast, and then I do have kind of my tinkerer's knack, and so when they would need somebody that could figure out something, a pneumatically driven prop or a motorized prop, I was sort of eager to do that, and so they would throw it at me, and um, the nature of the special effects industry is that, um, there's a lot of shops around, or there were back then,
Mhm.
and they would kind of crew up when they'd get big projects, but then as soon as a project's done, they'll lay everybody off, and everybody will sort of migrate to wherever the next job is.
Right.
And so some of those people would actually come and work at this haunted house place, and so I would meet them, and I ended up making some good connections just through people that I ended up working with there, who kind of introduced me to shop owners, and so I kind of graduated from that shop to um, to some of the bigger, more kind of like, well-renowned special effects companies that were actually like doing movies and big jobs.
So you made these connections. I'm sure, did one of them put you in alignment with your first film job?
Yeah. Uh,
So talk a little
so
bit about that. Like what was like do you have to like show work like things that you've built in the past in order to get these jobs, or like what's this interview process like?
so it's probably it's probably different. I think the practical effects side of special effects is it has a kind of a decidedly like blue collar kind of feel to it, and
Mhm.
so um, there it's they I'm trying to figure out the right way to say this. They don't really care that much about what your education is,
Mhm.
and in some ways, they kind of like, if I walk into a room and say that I have a master's degree in sculpture, they're going to immediately want to see the best, or assume that I can sculpt the best, Tyrannosaurus Rex or something like that, which I can't do because that's not the kind of sculpture I ever did. And then I will be judged harshly for that, because I'm a college boy who can't sculpt. And so like my kind of area of the business is very much about what you can do and not so much about what you say you can do.
Mhm.
And so you get put to the test pretty fast in terms of your skills. And so they do like to, well, I don't really, I haven't needed to do this in a while, but they did like to see sort of a portfolio
Yeah.
work, but they're always very, um, it's special effects. Everything's trickery, so they're
Yeah.
very suspicious of everything that you show them. They'll they're like, yeah, I see it in a picture, but
Yeah,
I
totally.
don't know how much of this you did.
Yeah.
Especially because everything we do is a team effort. So I can't ever say that, and I won't ever say that I did one thing all by myself, because I never do. I
Mhm.
do one part of it, and even a lot of times my part of it is I have a team of people working on my part of it too. Um, so it really, a lot of the kind of interview process is them throwing you in the fire and seeing what you can do. Um,
So do you remember the first effect that you did for a film?
um,
Like the first one that kind of like stands out, or like the first one that you're like, I don't know, or maybe the first
well,
time you saw it on screen or something.
well, um, so while I was still working at the Halloween place, there was an artist, a sculptor and painter, who would get contracted by that place a lot, but had his own sort of business. He was not attached to that company in any way other than sort of like contracting and friendship or whatever. And um, I became friends with him because he didn't have anybody who did mechanical stuff, animatronic stuff. He just had sculptors and painters and mold makers. Um, his name's Pat McGee, and he's still a friend of mine. And uh, he would do Halloween stuff, but was also trying to do more and more movie projects and music video projects. And so he got the movie Zombie Strippers, which is the first kind of big movie that I worked on. And that was really fun, and we did tons and tons of things for that, from like animatronic severed heads to exploding heads to just um, figuring. I probably made 30 different versions of kind of things that you could pack blood and guts into, that you would pull a trigger and they just blast it on a wall or something like that, just for kind of like you know non-pyrotechnic squib hits and stuff like
Is
that.
that is that kind of stuff like do you like the because I feel like to your work there'd be two levels. There's like the exploding heads and then there's like the subtle stuff that you may not know about. Do you have a preference to one or the other, kind of the over the top or the subtle?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different. I don't do a whole lot of. So there's like exploding heads and squib hits would be traditional special effects.
Mhm.
And I don't do a lot of that stuff. I did it on. I have done some of it, a good amount of it, because a lot of that stuff is traditionally done with actual explosives, and so on a movie of the scale of Zombie Strippers, want they couldn't afford to have actual pyrotechnics on set, so they wanted to figure out a way to do it that wasn't dangerous. And so we did it with like compressed air.
Oh wow.
And so it was fun to figure out, but I don't end up doing that much of that stuff anymore. Now I do, what I do is kind of more, um, falls in the category, more in the category of kind of character effects.
Mhm.
So which is more fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
So over the like, are there any characters that you're particularly proud of, or things that you've worked on over the years, that like you look back on and be like, man, that was a real proud moment for me. Like, is there projects that you have that are like that?
well, I mean, the Baby Yoda is
Yeah,
that.
I was
Yeah.
gonna lead into Baby Yoda with this one, but we'll get there. So let's talk
Yeah.
about Baby Yoda a little bit. Um, for starters, like, how did you hear about the project? Like, how did they reach out to you?
Well, so I've been working at a place called Legacy Effects
Mhm.
for um 7 or 8 years now. And when I started working there, uh, I they they're actually one of the kind of, I mean, the industry size has shrunk a lot.
Mhm.
There's not as nearly as much work for practical effects companies as there. I mean, it's been shrinking as long as I've been in it. Um, but Legacy is is kind of a unique company in that they really, there's another terrible thing to say, but they really value their employees,
Mhm.
whereas a lot of the other companies that I've worked for didn't necessarily. They valued us, but not in a way that would make them try to keep us around once a job was
Sure,
over.
sure.
Um, Whereas Legacy does do that, and so since I started working at Legacy, I haven't had to go work anywhere else.
That's great.
So, which is great. Um, and we also are kind of, I think that's part of the reason why we're one of the last big practical effects shops in Los Angeles. There are a bunch around, but not nearly as many as there once were. And so as they sort of go away, Legacy is like the Blob; it gets stronger and stronger. Um, and so they are the ones that got that job.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't I
Right,
didn't
right,
I
right.
didn't get the job to do the Mandalorian. I just work at Legacy, and that was part of the job that they contracted for. And then they threw that on my desk.
Yeah, that's amazing. So so I'm sure because you've talked about how creating these type of creatures is a collaborative effort, and I'm sure with because the Star Wars people, I'm sure there's a lot of people that go into creating a character like that. What's your role and what is like your specialty on Baby Yoda?
So so when it came to us, it was a series of concept illustrations
Mhm.
that I'm sure had gone through a lot of people's hands, because
Mhm.
I know that they thought a lot about how big its ears should be versus how big its eyes should be versus how wrinkly it should be versus how tall it should be. And there's a lot of thought process that goes into it before we ever get it, but we get it at a point at which it's kind of concept illustrations that that they're happy with in terms of like its proportion and its look and stuff. And then we have our own designers we have a digital department, and so they'll take those concept illustrations and turn them into a 3D model, like a 3D sculpture of the character. And then one of the things that's been my kind of specialty at Legacy is sort of I can start, which doesn't sound that special now, but for some reason it is there. I can start working on because I have sort of a self-taught 3D background, so I can start working with the files as soon as they've got a digital sculpture of it. I can start designing my mechanical stuff to go inside it. And some of that is also kind of figuring out the mold making process for it, and because there's a million steps in with the mold making and the 3D printing of it, and how they'll break up the 3D print into different parts, and so I'm pretty involved with it from kind of the beginning of when it gets to our shop.
How much lead time do you guys get on a project like this? Like how long out do they, because the designs come in, you start working, and then the 3D assets come in, you start working with those. How long is that process between actually starting to shoot?
I think we had 12 weeks.
No way.
Yeah.
I was like, it's going to be like a year or two or something.
No, it wasn't.
Oh,
And it's funny because like, we've, in the old days, I think they would have had a year to do it.
Yeah.
But also because at Legacy we do a lot of television commercials, so we're used to kind of a turnaround time where you get the job and it has to be on set in 3 days or something like that.
Yeah.
So we are kind of used to hitting the ground sprinting. And so 12 weeks felt like a lot.
And then do they give you like because the character exists in the little pod, he walks around a little bit, like he does some other stuff. Is there like a to-do list or a list of motions that you need to have, or is it like, or do you make like a bunch of different separate characters?
Sometimes there is, and in some cases, like we'll get the screenplay or the script or something like that, and obviously you want to read that and know the specific actions that the thing's going to have to do, but in this case it kind of had to do everything, and so I didn't really get a to-do list in terms of, I mean, I did know that it was going to have to sit in that pod, but for the most part, I was just, everybody who looked at that was like, yeah, this has just got to be awesome. And so the idea is just to make it do as much as it can possibly do.
And then for and so I assume that when they shoot, you go on set and you help with the controls of it and that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So is it all like, or do you have like a bunch of remote controls for it? Like, what are the actual interactions for them?
Yeah, it's so that character takes 3 people with basically just its control system isn't anything sort of super high tech for us. Like, we do things that are much more sophisticated in terms of the control. It takes 3 people with just sort of traditional remote control, like model airplane remote controls, and then 1 other person that does his body and arms in like kind of a traditional rod puppet style, where he has a rod attached to a hand, and they'll just kind of paint that out in post.
Yeah, it's funny. One of our students is a compositor who he's like, oh, I've painted out those rigs before. I know that guy.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, for anyone who's watching, there's going to be a Q&A at the end. If you want to just throw any questions you have for Peter in the chat window, I'll circle back around to some questions at the end. But um, so when you have to synchronize three people controlling this character, even though it's relatively simple. You guys have to create a performance for the shoot the same way that any other actor would, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like it's reacting live, and it's because I always think about things being CG characters and like you just have total control of them outside of
Yeah.
it, but you're actually like interacting with Nando and with all the other characters.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really fun because you are. It is. Because none of us are professional puppeteers, but we are like there are people in the world who that is their job is to be a puppeteer, and they go out on auditions and the only puppeteer. But for us, puppeteering is sort of a really cool sort of like side effect of our job. And so, because everybody that puppeteers the Baby Yoda actually works at Legacy, we're together all the time,
Oh yeah.
and we have worked um, on other jobs together. And so one of the guys that I would puppeteer Baby Yoda with, I also work with on these Lunchables commercials where we puppeteer a platypus and a jackalope. And so we have a history of performing together, and it's the same with the other guys. Like I've worked with them on a lot of times it's commercials, but we it's surprising how quickly we kind of like fall into like cohesion as a group.
And do you have like do you always does like one person always control the eyes, one person always does this? So you guys have like so you just have your system?
Well, on the Baby, yes.
Yeah.
Because and I actually should say that I don't actually puppeteer on it
Yeah.
very much anymore because I did for the first couple weeks of the first season of Mandalorian, but then I got rotated out to work on a movie that was back at the shop, and then shortly after I got rotated out, the production decided that they didn't want to keep rotating people around because they knew it was going to be a big character, and they wanted its performance to be kind of locked in.
Yeah.
And so it kind of like the team of I'm like the first reserve puppeteer, but like but like the team of people that puppeteer it kind of like crystallized shortly after I got rotated out. Um, but so the same people do the same thing every time because they want to try and keep that performance as consistent as possible.
That's so cool. We do have and I know I said we do questions at the end, but there are a couple of Baby Yoda specific questions that I'll probably get to. One of the questions was, how have the rigs and controls changed between season one and now? Did you guys update them or change them at all?
We actually, um, so for the one of the nice things about it so for the longest time we didn't do a lot of television stuff. We did movies and we did commercials. And in the past couple of years, television has obviously like become, and I say television including like streaming things, but that has obviously become the way, like the bulk of you know entertainment right now, it feels like. And so one of the things that we would always complain about is that because everything we build is a prototype, and so you don't get to know really how well it works until it's on set, and you're finding out that you didn't do a very good job building it. And so it's kind of with the Mandalorian, it's kind of an ideal situation because we not we were able to sort of like try it out the first season, and then over the course of that season we can kind of like tweak what we've got a little bit. But then with the second season we were able to add some new um, some new components to it to kind of like improve the performance. And so the main puppet on the first season, um, I can't remember exactly. It has something like, I want to say it has nine motors in its head, nine little motors in its head, and then um, another 10 or 12 motors outside its body that are connected to the body through like an umbilical cord, and that drive movements with little strings going through kind of like cable housing, kind of like on a bicycle, like a bike brake cable housing. Um, and so every time you see the puppet, 4 feet away from it is a big bulky package of motors and batteries and electronics that can't get detached from it, because if you detach it, you can't ever reconnect it. And so for the second season, one of the things that we made was a completely standalone Baby Yoda puppet that doesn't have every single move that the first one had, but has a lot of them. And so um, that that it was sort of a kind of like a bridge between having a fully animatronic puppet and basically like a stuffed animal. So now we've got a version of it that can do probably like 75% of the functions as the original.
Yeah.
And so when we need to shoot like a close up on its face, we'll still use the original. But for a lot of the scenes where they're carrying it or it's in a bag or something like that, we'll use the standalone one. Um, and that was great because we and the production were able to figure out things that they could need for the second season.
Right. So I mean, I could talk about Baby Yoda all day, but I do want to ask you about, because you do so many things. Like I said, in your bio, you make your own surfboards, you have all these art installations, you teach drawing. You also have
I should say that that bio is a little bit old because I don't teach drawing anymore.
okay, but you still make surfboards. Is that true?
I haven't made a surfboard in a while either.
Oh, come on, you're killing me. No, you're good. But I do want to talk about the one of the projects that came up, was your Killzotis project.
Mm.
I just want to. So, is this a personal project? Like, talk to me about Killzotis.
Yeah, so I guess so like 2 years ago probably, actually the project that I got rotated off of the Baby Yoda team originally um, was to build robots for a movie that hasn't come out yet, that I think is going to come out maybe in a year. It's a kind of post-apocalyptic Tom Hanks movie where he's like a last surviving scientist and has built himself some robot companions. And so we built these robots for the movie, and it's shot in New Mexico. And so I spent 3 months in New Mexico, kind of with these robot puppets that we built to be really sophisticated. But then we got on set and maybe they decided that they were going to kind of head in a sort of a more CG heavy direction than a puppet direction. And so so I ended up on set with a lot of free time. and um, and so I started writing this project, because for the longest time I have been sort of thinking about what my next steps are, if I'm going to want to be making puppets for the rest of my life, or if I'm going to try and start, kind of moving in a more executive level
Yeah, of course.
career if I can.
Yeah.
I always say that I get a little bit tired of bringing other people's dumb ideas to life when I've got plenty of my own dumb ideas.
My own dumb ideas. That's great.
Um, and so I thought that might be the only opportunity it could be the only opportunity I ever have to essentially get paid to write.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a screenplay originally, like a feature length screenplay. And kind of for me, even if I'm writing, part of my creative process is drawing and sketching and, that kind of thing. And so as I was writing, I was also drawing the characters, and then some of my character drawings started looking pretty cool, and so then I um, thought, maybe I should add a little animation. So I started trying to teach myself a little bit of kind of just rudimentary kind of animation to go with it, and then um, sort of as I was finishing the script, I was also finishing these kind of like short little animated things that actually in that were originally just for me kind of, but as they got better, I was like, I could actually show these. um and so then um yeah, so then as because a script is only a script if it's only paper until you can sell it. And
Yeah.
so then I sort of started putting a website together where I could kind of like put my animations, and then I made um, some little kind of like short live action pieces to go on it too. And
Yeah.
um,
And for everyone watching, you should check them out after this, not right now. Killzotis.com.
yeah,
I really liked your live action little one with the woman on. It was either like Snapchat or
yeah,
Instagram Live or whatever. I won't spoil, but it's a very short clip, but it's a very funny take on the little AI
yeah,
dog ear things. I laughed a lot when I saw that. That
yeah.
was very funny.
That was fun to make. But yeah, so like I don't know if I'll ever be able to sell the script or anything, but it's a fun, and it's funny. It was kind of wild to me that I did actually write it. I finished the first draft like a full year before anybody ever said the word coronavirus, and before um, I didn't specifically write it about this political time. Um, More kind of about American politics in general, but like so much of it kind of kind of like came true.
No, it's kind
that
of
it
it's
actually
really
came true in a way that's way weirder than I could ever write it. So um
yeah, because looking at it at the end of 2020, I'm sure looks very different
yeah,
than when you originally created it.
yeah, I'm actually kind of, I mean, 2020 kind of ruined my script, but
Because it's not a fantasy anymore. It's
no,
real.
it's not
We're
a
actually
thing.
doing all
And
of this stuff.
it's not even that crazy anymore. So
Like it's literally just zombies away from being day-to-day life.
yeah, it is pretty
Um,
much.
that's so cool. So I do want to open it up to some questions
Yeah.
before we go. One of the like this one is the big one. So do you have any advice for students starting off in this field?
Um, I guess, it's a good the hmm. That's always a tricky one because um so for me, I didn't actually know about the field. Like
Right.
I sort of figured out what the field was. Like when I came out to Los Angeles, I didn't know that there was a difference between the kind of special effects that makes rain and snow on set, the kind of special effects that makes cars explode, the kind of special effects that makes, you know, Tyrannosaurus Rexes run through stages and stuff like that. But there is, and it's all, it's all pretty, there's not a lot of overlap between those things. So the more, the more you can, um, the more you can sort of like set your sights on what you really want to do before you're trying to do it, obviously the better off you'll have. It's a big field, and so if you can narrow it from the beginning, you'll kind of be a little bit, I would assume you'll be a little bit better off.
Mhm.
I sort of gravitated towards what I do because I was learning about what the various aspects of the field are, and kind of saying like, oh, that looks like something that I would think is fun and would be good at. And but I think I probably could have saved a little bit of time if I'd known, animatronic effects was a thing. I did know it was a thing. I just didn't know where I would find it. And it's
Yeah.
probably easier now that all these companies have Instagram pages and things like that. Um,
No, that's really cool. Yeah, because it's kind of one of those things that yeah, I mean, probably the time that we were starting off, there wasn't Instagram stories about these. Like I didn't know there was a difference between visual effects and special effects when I was first getting started. I just thought, I was like, I just want to do animation. And yeah, so there's a lot of just kind of discovery. And one of the things I liked about your story from going from RISD out to the West Coast was just kind of a like, I don't know if it's naivete, but like you're just kind of like confident, like, oh yeah, I'll make this work, whatever. Like it'll all be good. Like, do you find, because you kind of have this, I've noticed this in the stories that you tell, you kind of have this, like, do you have a feeling of like when you're trying something new, whether it's writing a script or creating something new, do you kind of approach new challenges openly? Do you find, are you like, oh yeah, I can figure that out, like I'll just jump right into it and get going? Is that something that you find that yourself doing?
Um, I guess, yeah. I don't have a lot of like I have a I'm confident um in my ability to learn things.
Mhm.
Like I think that's probably like especially like things of sort of like a technical or kind of creative nature. And so like I don't treat um like I have, if there's something I want to know how to do, especially if I can give myself a project,
Mhm.
like it would be very hard for me to just say like, oh, I want to learn how to animate stuff. But if I can say I have I want to make this little teaser for my screenplay and it's probably going to have to be animated, then I can learn that. Then I can learn pretty well. I know how I learn.
Mhm.
It was something I kind of figured out in grad school. Like I know the a way the way that I learn things the best. And so if I can have a project that involves me learning a new technology or trick or tool or something like that, then I know I can learn. Then I have a good. I'm very confident in my ability to learn that,
Yeah.
um, and so I don't have a lot of self doubt.
That's good. That's a good characteristic to have. uh, um, so a couple other questions, and again, thank you so much for your time. So Annabelle was asking, I was wondering if animatronics are also used on stop motion films.
So I've never actually done a stop motion film, but I have looked at sort of like the process that they do. They don't do animatronics kind of in the same way that we do them, where because obviously their stuff doesn't move on camera, but I know that there's been a lot of development in that field in terms of how precisely, like it started out where it was an armature made out of soft aluminum and they'd bend it by hand, but now they're making their armatures where they can adjust the increments of their motion very precisely, with motors, and you know they'll like stick a screwdriver in and turn the screwdriver just a tiny bit and it'll move the arm just a tiny bit. um, but I know they're also doing, it's not animatronics, but a lot of they're doing a lot of 3D printed stuff in stop motion, on stop motion puppets, where they'll have like interchangeable 3D printed faces that are
Yeah.
actually like the they'll have 1,000 faces that are actually the cells in the animation, so they can pop it off so that the face animates as they click their pictures away, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. By the way, the set of both your projects and these stop motion projects all just sound like horror movies in themselves. There's like a bunch of baby Yodas that move in different ways. There's a bunch of faces of all the characters.
Yeah.
Um, um, so we'll do. I tell you what, we'll call this last question. Do you think that the characters like Baby Yoda and the Dark Crystal from the Netflix series will revive more practical effects in film?
Um, I don't. I guess there's that. That's sort of like a. That's sort of like a two or a multi-pronged question because whether or not I think it will, I don't know because that has less to do um, with creative decisions than I think in a lot of cases it has to do with sort of production decisions and financial decisions because um, it has to do with the way that movies get made and movies get funded. I know that there is a lot of interest in them from a creative standpoint. Actors love to have them on set because, as opposed to, they one of the things they say about acting is that acting is reacting, and um, no actor wants to stand on set and talk to nothing or talk to a green ball or talk to a chrome ball when they can be talking to something that is reacting to them and giving them um, some emotion back, which is what a puppet can do. Um, and you know, a lot of directors who are making things now are people who are around my age who grew up watching, you know, Jim Henson movies and Steven Spielberg movies, and so they of course want to have, you know, giant puppets on their sets because it's fun and
Yeah.
it's something that you can put on camera, um, and you can make your actors run from it. You can make it kill your actors. You can make it like make your actors cry. You know, it's an you can light them. You can you know do all sorts of stuff with it. I personally think that the best thing is a combination of puppet and CG, which is what the Baby Yoda is, which
Mhm.
is so great. They use a lot of the puppet, um, but there are some things that we can't do with a puppet, um, and so I think that the combination of the two is the best, and I hope that that is what, you know, from a creative standpoint. I hope that that kind of keeps going and surviving. From a financial standpoint, I know that they hate the idea of having a Baby Yoda that takes 4 or 5 people to that they have to pay to operate, because each of us is an actor and we get paid as an actor, and so that Baby Yoda costs as much as 5 actors, and then also they have to um, they have to commit to something, which unfortunately I think is sort of a trend in the way that filmmaking is happening now, which is that um, nobody likes to commit to something up front because they're always worried that if they commit to something, then they're not going to be able to change it when the test audience doesn't like it down the road or whatever. And so if you shoot a whole movie that doesn't have any monsters in it, you can change those monsters to robots later. You can change your aliens to dinosaurs later or whatever, um, that you couldn't do if you had those in the actual camera in the shot. Um, so I hope it sticks around. I hope there's more of it. I don't know if there will be.
Well, it's like you said. I mean, there are just instances when it works better. Like I said, I mean, they tried Yoda as a total CG character in some of the Star Wars films in the late '90s, and it just he wasn't as success. Like the audience just wasn't able to make the same
Yeah.
engagement to him as they were in the '70s and '80s. So, um, but like you said, there are times when um, you'll need the character to do something that's not possible, or you have to like rig them with a string or something that needs
Yeah.
to be painted out later. So yeah, I think the combination of both is the way it's got to be going forward. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, Peter, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We are incredibly grateful for it, and I am so excited for you to keep chasing your dumb ideas, and hopefully you can get some more of those made. And we are, yeah. So I don't know how to end these without actually ending the call with you. So I genuinely want to say, like, honest to God, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for taking the time. I know
Yeah.
you're incredibly busy. We really, really appreciate this. And if people can travel again and you ever make it out to New York, I'd love to hang out with you.
Yeah, of course.
All right, man.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will talk to you all very soon. All right, take care, everybody. Thank you again, Peter.
Yeah.